I'm going to tell you about one of my favorite projects that I worked on at USC, and it's continuing. This is our 5th year of a 5-year grant. The work's been funded by NIH. If you have science education research and you're interested in applying it to health outcomes, this is where you go. They fund like 70 some odd projects every year. It's a large community, very, very exciting. So as Fawad mentioned, I am a big fan of The Simpsons. I use it to frame a lot of my work. So we're going to appropriately start today with 2 clips. Now I chose a different one from the talk I gave back last year when I visited for my job interview, and also the talk I gave earlier to the queries group. So these are different, and let's see what The Simpsons have to say. So a whole different kind of cheating. So I think what I love about that is Bart's perspective on studying and learning. It's a new way to cheat. And so if we think about those 2 videos, we see there's a lot of connections to some of the things we all do research on. We think about motivation, we think about engagement in learning activities, creating interest. Lisa changed from one extreme to the other in just a short amount of time. And I think more importantly, we need to think about Bart's perspective and how he views studying and learning as a new way to cheat is a very interesting point, I think. And so speaking the same language of the learners we interact with, understanding the worlds they live in, that's something very important to me. I have a 12-year-old, so I have an advantage right now on that. He's soon to be a teenager, and I know I'm going to lose that advantage because he probably won't say much to me. But I feel this is a really important thing. Understanding your audience is the basic point. So this is a large reason why I like to leverage games. I don't normally think of myself as a games person, but I want to communicate with kids and even young adults in ways that are familiar and engaging for them in particular, and that means we have to do the hard work of understanding them. And The Simpsons send that message, I think, quite effectively. All right. So let me just kind of summarize what I'd like to convey, and I know I'm following Bill and Rob's great talks. I'll try to be a little provocative, but I probably won't succeed as much as they did, and I probably won't get through my slides, so I'm just ready for that now. And please ask questions at any time. So the goals, I want to tell you about this project, Virtual Sprouts. It was very important to me. I made a lot of friends in this project. It has an interesting overall narrative, so I want to tell you about that. Many of us saw, I think, 6 talks on educational data mining, intelligent tutoring, and so I want to give you a little bit of my perspective on that field. I was in the Pittsburgh bubble for many years doing research there, and now that after leaving it and seeing a lot of different perspectives on the field, I wanted to share with you what I've come to believe about the field, and then finally show you a little bit about what happens when you engage in very extreme interdisciplinary research. I think it's one of my, one thing I really enjoy about being in academia is the opportunity to really team with people from many different disciplines and learn to work together. So I'm going to tell you that story. So here's the team for Virtual Sprouts. On the left there is Mariantina Gatsis, who is a professor in the School of Cinematic Arts. So she's an expert of game design. That's Gigi Ragusa there, who's with the Viterbi School of Engineering in Rossier. And then we have Donna Metz, who's in the middle there. She's the PI, a behavioral psychologist and expert in behavior change and mobile health. So she thinks about designing mobile apps to help people, quantitative self-research. She does a lot of interesting things. I recommend looking at her website if you need information on those topics. She's a real rock star in NIH and in behavior change. Next to her is Jamie Davis, who's a nutrition expert. So she does education research on nutrition and research on obesity and gardening. And so a lot of Jamie's work led into Virtual Sprouts. I'm going to tell you about that. And there's me. I had an appointment with Rossier and at ICT, and of course now Illinois, Knuckles. Has anyone ever given you Knuckles during a talk?
As long as they're not from Michigan.
And we had some partners, of course, in Southern California, CSC and LAUSD. So exciting collection. Not showing on here are the gardeners and educators we worked with as well. So, well, they're part of LASD, obviously, but working with gardeners was really fun. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about that, and I'm going to destroy you with a metaphor. Okay, so of how a plant grows is the structure for my talk. And so I couldn't resist this, right? It's really annoying, but it's too obvious not to do. So let me start off with tell you how did this project begin. And it's a really interesting story how it began, very surprising actually. It kind of links up to the work I was doing at USC. We had a great graphics team, great animation team, games people, a lot of interesting and engaging technologies. And one of the key parts to the lab where I worked was the graphics lab. And so what they do is photorealistic scanning of humans, and they create digital versions of it that are basically what this is called Light Stage. It can recreate any lighting situation, and it captures pictures from almost every angle, and then can put those faces in an environment so where it matches the surrounding light. So this is when you Photoshop someone into a picture and it looks weird, that's because the lighting is wrong. So they have solved that problem. And so this capability at ICT played a big role in virtual sprouts, and I'll tell you why. So you can see that's the scan of the model is Bianca Rodriguez, and it turned into twins. You only have to scan once to get two. Kind of cool. Like Ray Romano said, he has twins. It saves money on photographs. It's really true here. So what happened? Our NSF program officer was really excited by the work, and she set up a meeting at the White House to go visit with President Obama's team to propose building a virtual Barack Obama to promote education and science. So they hated the idea. It was an absolute no. And the reason was they couldn't control what the character might say. And even if they were promised, it just was too risky to do a virtual Barack Obama. So the program officer and then our director of technology went, Bill Sordout, and but then they started talking with Michelle Obama's team, and that was a different topic. So Michelle Obama has her First Lady's organic garden, and so the idea to create some sort of complement to the organic garden started with that conversation. And so the USC representatives in Washington, D.C. Brought Donna in, who's had NIH funding before, has led obesity research, of course, for many years, and we collaborated to start this project. So it's kind of a neat story. Although we didn't create a virtual Michelle Obama, this was the beginning of the project, and we still kind of highlight that connection. Okay, so that was before the project. Let me tell you a little bit about kind of the initial foundations of the project, the first roots, what laid the foundation for virtual sprouts. So motivation-wise, it all boils down to behavior, the choices we make. There's many review papers like this, but this is a particularly powerful one. When you break down contributions to premature death, behavioral patterns is the largest factor in that. So this is a massive review, meta-analysis of many, many studies. And so 40% of premature deaths have to do with some sort of behavior choice. And if you break that down, you can see there are many different factors in those. But obesity, inactivity, and smoking are by far the two largest. So addressing obesity, addressing inactivity is the right step to take if you want to help improve or reduce premature deaths. Okay, so the other kind of root of the project is this previous effort called LA Sprouts. And so this effort was led by Jamie Davis, who's on the Virtual Sprouts team. And what they did is they went around and built many urban gardens in Los Angeles and brought kids out of the schools into gardens to actually grow their own produce, cook their own meals, and work with gardeners face to face. Now, of course, this is a limited resource, just like the First Lady's organic garden. Not enough of this to go around, and so that that was also motivation for Virtual Sprouts, to encourage interest in gardening and cooking and give more kids an opportunity to experience those. And there are many gardening apps as well out there, obviously, but ours was, I'm going to tell you how ours was designed in just a second. So what is the research behind gardening? Well, it's actually pretty healthy literature on what the power of gardening and getting kids out there. I do remember one story. I'll show you a picture of some of the gardeners we worked with, but I asked, what was a moment that you remember working with a kid in a garden that kind of changed the way they maybe understood the world? And she told the story of a kid who pulled his first carrot out of the dirt. And it was this look of horror at this dirty, messy, ugly carrot, and very slow. It was just a really dramatic moment for a child who thinks carrots come from the store in a plastic bag and are peeled. That's where carrots are from when you ask them. So that's the kind of power we're hoping for here, to basically bring out the joy of creating your own food. Other benefits are it maps very cleanly onto standards, and we did that in this project. I'll show you examples of how we map the content into California science standards. So that's a benefit to frame learning in schools. And then many research studies on the consequences of using a garden-based curriculum and educational content. So you can just see. And kids who garden say they want more fruits and vegetables in their diet. They actually eat more fruits and vegetables. Their math and science scores increase. They have less stress. And then, of course, Jamie and Donna's work have shown to reduced obesity. So very powerful, very, there are open questions, obviously, but this is, gardening is a very important factor, I think, to consider in science education, and many people are doing that. Okay, so I want to tell you a little bit about so another kind of big foundational piece of the project is what theory we're going to work around. And so with behavior, and there are many options. I mean, there's play, and different kinds of theories that you might choose, but we, since this was a pediatric obesity project, we have used self-determination theory as the primary theory. So the purpose of the whole intervention is to reduce sugar intake, increase fruits and vegetables. I guess I should have increase activity as well. Gardening is active, moving around, getting dirty, and that, and we want to reduce visceral fat. And so that's the long-term goal of the project. So the theory is self-determination theory, DC and Ryan's work, and many of you probably are familiar with it. It's a theory of motivation. And so for our particular project, we want to enhance motivation to eat well, eat better, connectedness and relatedness to family and others in your life that are important to you, and competence to garden and cook, to be able to do these things, and the autonomy piece is in there as well, to be able to do them without tons of help, to know what you're doing. And so all of our project revolves around these ideas. And so I'm going to show you the part of the project I led, which was on our pedagogical agent, and I'm going to link these throughout the talk. Okay, so I don't know if you've seen Edward Dece's TED Talk, but he summarizes it like this. Don't ask how you can motivate others, ask how you can create conditions within which others will motivate themselves. And so we're really going for this autonomous motivation. Intrinsic rewards are king, and that's what we want to create in this project. Now our pilot data, I don't know if I'll have time to get to it at the end, but actually found extrinsic motivation was more powerful. So we're kind of, all of our gears are turning, what's going on there. And the current hypothesis is the collectiveness of Hispanic and African American communities in LA might change the way that works. And so what your parents say and what adults say might matter more in highly connected social groups. So we're thinking about that.
Or because it's a certain logic.
Yeah? Who's Desi's work? Yeah, maybe. So, and I also, so this is what a lot of my talk is going to be about, is what the technological pieces are to Virtual Sprouts. So, of course, there's video game technologies involved. We leveraged, so at USC, one of the leading game designers there, her name's Tracy Fullerton, has this complete process for game design. And so we It's called play-centric, where you do paper and pencil prototypes. You test game mechanics for engagement and interest. Not always educational. She does games in general for many purposes. But we used her approach, and that Mariantina implemented this, and I have some photographs of that work. We did this on a mobile device, and that's related to Donna's work. And then we worked at ICT to build an intelligent tutoring system that could be there to promote science learning and also do encouragement and address motivational concerns. All right, so now I want to say a few things about intelligent tutoring in general, based on what we've heard in February and some of the conversations we've had since. So to do that, I just want to kind of take a quick aside and walk you through how a cognitive model works. And so many of you may have seen this if you've read papers on tutoring systems, but this is really the basic idea. When you have a student solving problems, step by step, deciding what to do, applying the rules of a new task domain, an intelligent tutor observes that, and then it matches it to the computational model that can also solve those problems. And so here's an example from algebra and several different steps that a student might put as the next step. So the cognitive model has the capability of understanding which rule you've applied. And so the problem spaces can get quite large, and so brute force solutions to tracking a student through a large problem space can be difficult. So this is where AI can help. So a cognitive model essentially consists of production rules like this that match steps that students take to rules. And you may have noticed one of these rules is incorrect. And so that means you can also model flawed knowledge with these cognitive models. I also want to add, this is just one way of building a tutoring system. There are other constraint-based tutoring systems are a major presence, which are very different than this. And then there's other different, some of the data mining approaches lead to other approaches as well. And so anyway, I want to tell you a little more about this. So model tracing, which is a result of John Anderson's early work in tutoring, this is the idea of tracking a student through a big problem space. So they take a step and you match it against the expert path or what the computational model says is right, and you then have to decide if you're going to get them back on path or let them stay off path and give in. So this is how tutoring systems, the core idea of a tutoring system works. You can attach hints and feedback to these things, and that's when the tutoring system speaks up. You need a policy to tell you when to say this and when not. So that's a really important piece of it. And then if you have this, then you can also calculate estimates. The student understands each of those rules. And so here, after a while, maybe they have solved other problems and you start to build up a belief that they understand a particular rule. So you can very easily achieve mastery learning with these systems just by letting them solve problems over and over and over again until all of these things hit 100%. So that's sort of at the heart of tutoring systems. It's much more than that, though. And so this is where I get maybe pushing the provocative piece. So I've heard a bunch of things about tutoring systems, so I'm going to try to say a few words. So here's a few things I've heard over the years, and I'm not saying here, I'm saying in general. ITSs are too rigid and restrictive. They only work on these task domains that involve symbol manipulation. Another one might be, oh, they're too machine-like. They ignore the social elements of learning. Another one, it's too fine of a granularity. How do you know that's an accurate model of human cognition? And then another one I've heard is they're just too hard to build. For that return on investment, we need other cheaper ways to achieve those gains. They don't scale well. So I don't particularly agree with a lot of these. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit, and this talk is actually an example of counter examples to some of these. I sort of think the last one, maybe there's something to that. And there's a huge research effort now going to build authoring tools that do machine learning on demonstrations of expert performance to build these very expensive cognitive models automatically. My latest paper at AI Ed is on an authoring tool for intelligent tutors. So addressing this challenge is recognized, and I think a lot of progress is being made. So those are interesting. And I'm happy to debate more of these later because I think maybe the picture of ITS that we had in February was an important slice, but it is much broader than what was seen. And so I want to tell you, once you start dropping sort of constraints on how a tutoring system works, like Is it in a formal environment? Is it in an informal environment? What happened? So if a tutoring system, if you just take it out of the box and put it in a museum, I mean, kids are probably not going to choose that over other exhibits. So how does that context change the way the tutoring systems should behave? And so in Boston, in that work, we had to address that. It's not just enough to convey knowledge at the right time. It's more than that. And so ITS technologies are still helpful, I think, in a lot of those non-traditional situations. I thought I had I thought I had another piece there, but maybe it's gone. So related to tutoring systems is this idea of putting an embodied agent, so a body to the tutor. So it could be disembodied and just give you help. But why would someone want to go add a character there? It's a lot of work. And I can tell you, having done a bunch of these projects, the process of deciding what the agent should look like, is it human or not, age, race, clothing, voice, all of these things are very hard, and there's very little empirical guidance on how to do that. And so this is a big decision to add an agent. It really makes a difference if you do it. It adds cognitive load. So it's now yet more for the student to look at and understand. So there's a whole host of issues, but this is the argument for why you might want to do it. So the first argument is that an agent can live in that environment with the student. And that enables navigation, support, direction, nonverbal signals, demonstrations, and also to maybe even be a part of the story. I did, one of the things I did before I left USC was to run a workshop on how the evidence behind pedagogical agents. And Michelle came and gave a great talk on nonverbal behaviors and math learning and more. And so, there's a lot to this. And no one talks about a teacher just adds cognitive load to the classroom. No one ever talks about that stuff. So it shouldn't be as crazy to add these agents as maybe it is often framed. Another thing they can do, and this little guy looks like he ate something, didn't work for him there. They can emote and send these emotional and social signals. So that can lead to rapport and increased social presence. Roxana Moreno studied that with Rich Mayer for a while. Finally, and this one is not, I guess, specific to an embodied agent, because you can have dialogue systems that are text only that converse with learners, but it is kind of rolled in together with the emotions and social signal stuff. But asking questions, giving explanations, feedback, and hints. This is a lot of the power of tutoring systems comes into this category. Is what is the support that's being provided, the timing of it, the content of it, and so we spend a lot of time thinking about that question. Okay, so this is the slide I was thinking of. So here's kind of my thinking on what the body of research and tutoring systems might provide to everybody. It's a little bit like the early days of AI, where it hit the AI winter because the promises weren't met, the early promises. And so AI has now become a very applied thing, a very driven field to solve problems rather than the more philosophical goals of simulating human beings to a high degree of accuracy. Tutoring is similar. There's a large body of tactics there that can help enhance learning and behavior outcomes. Modeling these kind of hidden steps that don't show up on a piece of paper, or maybe that don't map to a gestural action in a computer environment. Modeling the thinking behind problem solving is a very powerful capability. And so we want to do that. We want to model the reasoning that can lead then to visible actions. And that requires, of course, a lot of inference. And finally, these capabilities of assessing performance, tracking performance over time, and then the big one is adapting and changing the learning environment based on all of that. All of that stuff is hard. All of that stuff is important. And I think if you can do it properly and you can find the right corners to cut, the things that don't pay off as much, I see so much potential for tutoring systems. And this project is an example of that. All right. So again, feel free to ask questions. Let's move on. So now here we go. What are the first kind of products, the first buds and the initial leaves, and what are some of the things we built and created at the beginning of the project? And so I'm going to show you some of that. These are these are just several photographs from the early days of the project. At the upper left here, you can see we had a big meeting, and this was my working group. There's a teacher, a gardener, and a local official from Los Angeles. So we really did try to bring in different perspectives to these meetings and talk about what the game could be like, what it should look like, who it should be designed for, and for what purposes. And so that was a really valuable experience for me to meet all of the people with different views on it. That happens to be my son playing one of the early prototypes there. I try to bring him to meetings as often as possible. And then here's some more kids working on one of the early pencil and paper prototypes in the game innovation lab. So that's a one-way mirror behind them. They're being observed. And then a close-up of another prototype. So this, this whole process is based on taking a game designer's intuition on what will be engaging, and then observing actual kids in the target audience playing those games, seeing what works, what doesn't, before you've even thrown one line of code. And game designers often say, digital or not, it doesn't matter. Is this activity engaging and interesting? What isn't understandable, and what's working better than we thought? These are all the goals at this phase of the project. Here's one thing I learned in this project. As sort of we were doing the agent was our primary goal, but of course it's connected to everything else. What do we do while these guys are doing pencil and paper prototypes? We observe, right? We help. But we knew we had all of this technical work ahead of us. We had to design a cognitive model for gardening. We had to do a cognitive model for cooking. And because that was going to be, these are the key ingredients from LA Sprouts. So what we did is we went off and made a Minecraft prototype. And we used this to build our cognitive model. We knew this wouldn't be the final game, but we needed an environment to start working on. So I showed you those rules for algebra. We wanted an analogous model for gardening and cooking. And so we did that in this Minecraft system. I had an amazing intern who in a week we had something up and running with a couple of rules in it, and we could track kids in this garden. It was really cool. He even went all out and he added a McDonald's here because it's urban. Cars come by, you can go get on the bus to go home when it turns nighttime. I love all that stuff. And they're an intern, so yeah, go nuts, have fun, make it yours. And so we did that, and you can see a few more things. So here's a good Minecraft watermelon. Minecraft tomato. And so we built our first version. It was, so-so. We brought it to a couple of gardeners, and they made a bunch of suggestions like, well, you got to put on gloves. You wouldn't be in the garden without gloves, so we added gloves, and here's Minecraft gloves. So in this game, you go and you got to pick with the sun is moving, so you have to pick a spot with the proper sunlight for the produce for the seeds you've selected. And you can do that wrong. The soil has different levels. You have one of the tools available is a sensor, so you can tell the different composition of different spots and make the right choice for what you're trying to grow. And so this tutoring system runs over here, and you can see a little bit of the logging. Rules are firing, different things are activating, and it's tracking the right way to do this, the right location, the right amount of water, the right amount of sunlight, the right time to harvest. And so what we did here is we added a set of lights back here that would go red, green, or yellow, telling you if you're doing the right thing, if you're not doing the right thing, if it's okay but not really particularly helpful. We kind of set it off in the distance, but we wanted a way to communicate that this rule system's actually working and matching up. So it's doing what tutoring systems do. It's matching actions in the environment to what the model says is the right thing to do. So we did that work knowing full well that the final game wouldn't look anything like this. It would involve some of the same concepts. But we did that to get a lot of this legwork out of the way and start testing our models. And so we learned some stuff from this. One is, not surprisingly, these models are pretty rigid. There was kind of one way to grow a tomato. And the master gardeners and educators, the pedagogy in gardens is you don't do wrong. You can't do anything wrong. It's you're out there having fun, you're growing food, and it's all about the right way, or a right way, I guess I should phrase it. And if you do it, you just don't make mistakes. And so we had to completely change how the tutoring system worked, because tutoring systems tend to tell you when you're right and wrong, right? And so, so we needed a really flexible system. We needed one that really didn't have any sign of negative feedback or even talking about mistakes. Now you can explain why. So the game you might create in virtual sprouts, you might end up creating mushy strawberries. It gives these funny adjectives telling you how you did after the gardening scene. But you know, it's more about, well, what do you do next time to create great strawberries? And you don't say, you know, but maybe, you know, less water next time would help. So this indirect negative feedback, I guess, is the closest we can get. And also, we did this. There's a scoring system. It's a game. And so low scores are also a way to give kind of negative feedback. Yeah, Dan?
Chad, did you remind me, you may have said this, and I missed it. What's your target? And it's kids, but you're assuming no knowledge about outdoors or gardening specifically?
It's, I probably didn't say it, but I should have. 3rd to 5th grade Latino youth in Los Angeles, Southern California. That's the specific target. Of course, anyone can play the game, and it's going to museums and health clinics everywhere for all ages. But it's designed for that audience. And the reason is, and I can communicate an answer to why that choice is made with a story. One of our gardeners told us they set up one of their urban gardens and they went out there. And in Los Angeles, if you've been there, you've probably seen this. There are these folks who push around a big cart and they sell food on the cart. And one of the most popular items are churros. So for like a quarter, you can get this wonderful, huge, greasy, sugary, cinnamon loaded, the cinnamon's not that bad, but churro with, you know, 600, 800 calories, whatever it is. So what kid in their right mind is gonna go get a dirty carrot out of the ground when a churro is there for really cheap? So that obesity is a severe challenge for that community, and we chose that community. So all the meals in Virtual Sprouts are from Latino Hispanic culture. So fresca, salsa, you know, things that grandma or mom might be making at home. And so that's the target audience. And so, and also I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but not a lot of existing knowledge on gardening for the most part, unless they were in LA Sprouts, I guess. All right, so down the home stretch here. What did we produce out of this work? And so I'm going to show you kind of the final, and I'm a real idiot. I have the iPad up in my office with the game, but I left it in my office. So if anyone wants to go get it, they could go get it. But I'll bring it down as fast as I can if you'd like to play. I have it here to play. But I'm going to show you some screenshots now. So Virtual Sprouts is the main kind of deliverable of the project. It's what's being evaluated. It's what's being shared publicly at the end of the project. It is really how all of this comes together. And oh, well, there you go. There's my audience. I did have it. So here's some screenshots from the game. So the game, School of Cinematic Arts, very creative, artistic community there, created a series of backstory screens here. So you learn about this ladybug. And so our agent is a ladybug, which was a result of many conversations with kids. You know, we didn't want probably a little human, but we didn't want kind of a scary insect. Although part of our goal was to also teach things like, you know, insects aren't scary. They're part of this environment, and even ones that you don't want in your garden are not inherently bad. And so I have a little bit in here about weeds I'm going to tell you that's, I think, gets that point across. So Dottie, here's Dottie inside the game, and she's helpful. She knows what you're trying to do. She gives you suggestions. She gives you encouragement. And behind her is these cognitive models of these skills you're applying. And so in the game, you listen to her initial guidance, say, hey, I'd like, here she says, let's make a salad. So very simple. Later in the game, she'll say things like, let's make something high in fiber and very filling. You know, and so you have to then match her guidance to a recipe. Now, truth be told, most kids don't care. the third to fifth grade, it's, oh yeah, I must start doing stuff, and so whatever the ladybug says to do, the first few times through, it's not real, it doesn't really register. And so but I skipped the recipe screen on these little screenshots, but before you pick an ingredient, you flip through all the different recipes. I mentioned frescas and salsas and wraps and salads you can make. And then you go and decide what you're going to grow. Okay, from that scene, you plant your seed in your urban garden here. It's on your balcony outside. And you then have to move this little box around. And what maybe doesn't show up here well is there's a shade here and a water source. And you have to decide the optimal location on your balcony to match the requirements for that plant. And so if you ignore it, you'll often get, mushy strawberries or small watermelon, things like this. Dottie's there trying to help you. Dottie's there talking about where you currently have the planter box and mentioning things like light. Also, a lot of fruits and vegetables depend on the season. I know in California, maybe not as much, but in general, the game's not necessarily in California. But she talks about that too, the ideal season for a different, and that's also in the cognitive model. It tries to figure out all of these, bring together all of these different factors in the decisions that are made. I wanted to show you a little bit under the hood though, because I think this is particularly interesting. We took great care on all of her utterances and the production rules that are matched to them as the cognitive model is firing, to link them to California standards, to get the language right. So we gave the list of all. In fact, I wanted to show you. I'll just show you now. So this document that we were working on, and this is part of interdisciplinary research, is to really find tools that allow you to communicate. So you can see here we're working our way through different utterances, and different members of the team are commenting on them. And getting the language right for third to fifth graders is not easy. So we did the first cut at this, and then Gigi came in and changed a lot of our language. And yeah, this is much better. It needs to be concrete. So we worked at length to get this right, to get the words to be understandable. Even the word survive wasn't quite appropriate for third graders, according to the research she was referring to. So these are interesting things to be thinking about, and things I would have never thought about if I was doing this without those interdisciplinary experts on the team. So these are all, again, associated with rules that are matched to student performance and then fired at appropriate times according to different pedagogical policies that you can dial up or down. And so we tried to find a sweet spot and when to do this and when not. When to say things, when not. And when to encourage, when to discourage. Here's Dottie in the kitchen now, and she's small sometimes because she flies around. And so here she's dropping in a little fact about, hey, high fiber meals will make you feel full. And you won't have to eat as much. So this is the super scrumptious salad. In the kitchen here, you have to go get your ingredients. You chop your produce here that you harvested yourself in the previous scene. You go to the cabinet and pull out different items. You go to the refrigerator and pull out different items. One of my favorite stories is we did some pilot testing at a great charity in Pacoima, California. It's north of LA, called MEND, Meet Each Need with Dignity, and they provide all kinds of services to Southern California. And one of the little participants there decided that she would put every single ingredient in her salad. And so it took about 20 minutes, but she went through and the bowl was just overflowing with ingredients. It was pretty cool. And I was carefully watching Dottie to see how she'd handle this. And she was dutifully not saying anything negative. Of course, there's nothing in the system. But I imagine inside she was wringing her hands like, oh God, this is so wrong. But she was saying great little tidbits about each item. Boy, that's high in vitamin C. Oh, that's a really good one. And, oh, I love that. That will really add flavor. And so, this is the pedagogy for this with this outcome in mind, and with we want. So, for example, an ideal outcome for this is that a kid goes home and wants to help in the kitchen. I mean, that's like a huge win. The best we can do for that, the big evaluations coming up next year, is to ask if that happened and interview parents, and so that will be done. Here's some more of the behind the scenes on Dottie. This is more on the health side. So we have the science utterances that are provided, and now the health, and a little bit of motivation there. I love how creative you've been. Try new things. And then this following the recipe will make it even better. Instead of saying, you're not following the recipe, you say, hey, maybe you can follow the recipe next time. So here's a kind of a key moment in the game. And we actually, this is an old version, sorry, that utterance is not the one that's actually given, but this is the chance to let the student reflect on what they did and to look back over the different phases of the game. So there's how well did you match the recipe? What was the quality of your gardening? How was your taste? So this is we implemented a little taste model, like bitter and sweet, and matched it to what the recipe's supposed to do. And so that all of these calculations are based on accuracy. And we originally wanted to have a little test panel with more insects, like a little, I liked it, it was great. Oh, I don't know, it didn't, So, but we ran out of money for that. And then, of course, the nutrients. So these are really the things we want that student to be thinking about. And to what degree they actually study that is unclear. So we're open to ideas to get students to pay attention, because these are the things that will improve their gameplay. This will help if they really look at this. The next time they go through the game, which it's just like any game, you just keep going until you want to stop. And this is the chance for them to improve their gameplay. And so motivating kids to really look at that and think about it would be a major improvement for us. Here's just some pictures of kids playing. This was actually the little girl who put everything in her salad. I thought I put this in here, but here's some kids at Mend. And so, so I'm almost out of time, but I'll tell you, so the pilot study was conducted with some preliminary results, and so I'll go ahead and share those. Actually just got some of them last night, so I haven't been able to dig in too much to all of this, but the pilot study was conducted in LAUSD in 6 schools, and I do want to say that normally these types of studies are run for 12 to 16 weeks. And so, yeah, the health behavior crowd really runs, those are important studies. And if you are looking for changes in BMI or behavior, it's almost a requirement. And so we kept a lot of the physical body measurements in there just for piloting purposes to make sure it could work with the school, that they would have enough time for all of it to be completed. But no one expected changes in body mass index, for example, in just 3 weeks of an intervention. But Virtual Sprouts, Gigi built a whole curriculum around it. So kids would come in they'd take the first week was pre-test measurements and all the surveys on motivation to eat fruits and vegetables. These are all previously used, validated, slightly modified for the game and the goals of the game, but based on previous work from LA Sprouts and others. For 3 weeks, 1 day a week, they'd get the curriculum, which is the teacher talking about gardening, science of gardening, cooking, all of the same topics. And then 1 day a week, they'd play the game. So that happened for 3 weeks in a row. And then the 5th week was the post-test and measurements. So here's a little detail on some of the measures. Pretty standard science and nutrition and health knowledge tests. A little tough maybe sometimes for that age. And then the interesting taste tests were given. So the researchers brought actual spinach and different things, tomatoes, to see if kids would even want to try them. And we didn't get any changes in that, in those measures, but they're common, and NIH likes it when you run them. And then also, as I mentioned, the surveys were about motivation. So here's a little bit of our breakdown. Pretty 3rd, 4th, and 5th. The mother has her own car, and for introduced lunch questions, as I understand it, have our indexes of poverty. So that was important to capture those those aspects of the audience and different. You can see the ages there. This was the sample. So here we had a primarily African American group, and that was kind of whatever schools could work, right? And so for the bigger study, the hope is to get a larger Latino, Hispanic Latino presence, because since the game was designed for that. So there are possible problems with the misalignment with the game in this group, but again, a pilot, so moving forward was important. Here's some kind of a summary of results, and these are the ones I just got recently. The big one there is that the gains in health knowledge. So these are questions about your health, about what's good for you, what activities are better for you. And so that was about the only, the gains in science knowledge, everything else there was no effect. But health knowledge stood out. A bunch of correlations there. I haven't dug into them yet, so I don't know what to say. I did want to mention this one. So this is the other set. This is the survey results. And so our behavior change folks were really encouraged by these. And so you can see gains in total self-efficacy and total motivation were significant. And so that's good. These are precursors to behavior change. These are important. These replicate what happened in LA Sprouts, so that was useful. And when you break down the different parts of self-efficacy and motivation, this is the thing I mentioned earlier. The extrinsic piece was actually the one that stood out a little bit. And so, yeah, we're kind of trying to figure that out. And then, sadly, the self-efficacy to garden was not the primary aspect to total self-efficacy, but eating fruits and vegetables really did jump out. Okay, so let me finish up, and then I think it'll be a few minutes for questions. I just want to share with you my lessons learned from this big adventure with a large team. We learned early on that we needed to devote a lot of time to finding our common language. And so computer scientists work with abstractions. And so I gave a talk about state and operators and problem spaces, and that little section I gave you on how tutoring systems work. I really had to lay that out, and it helped. It really did help. And each week a different PI would talk about their lab and their assumptions and their ways of discussing different aspects of projects they've done in the past and this new one that we're doing together. We met, we rotated. I felt that was important. I showed you that shared Google Doc. That was really a big deal. We'd put those things up on the screen and review the comments we had made. All of these things, I think, helped us be productive. And we were kind of learning as we went, because none of us had been on that big of an interdisciplinary team. And this is one that I think is really important. And you might just think, yeah, everyone's going to do this, but sometimes in what you say and what you do, it doesn't always come out. So you want to be really explicit about viewing all of your partners. You don't want to view them as a service to help achieve your work. It sounds like, well, who would do that, right? But it's funny how sometimes that's how it sounds. And so explicit recognition that everyone has a research agenda here, and they're all equally valid, is really an important thing to do. And when others talk to you. So from the computer science side of things, we need a change here, that's a simple example. Or on the research side, the research design needs this, and so how you frame that, how you discuss it, you want to be really good friends, and you want to have had social interactions prior to those kinds of meetings. So this is the end of this talk. What's funny is very recently, so this guy right here is Paul Debevic. His father was a professor at University of Illinois in physics, emeritus now. Paul went to uni, and he's the director of the graphics lab at ICT. And they got their way. They got to scan President Obama after all, but not to create a virtual Barack Obama. And here's the backside of it. They did it to create the first presidential 3D portrait. So that's a printed portrait. So it's very funny that they got to do what they wanted, but not exactly. And so with that, I want to thank you for your time. And I guess it's almost time's up. But.